There are places that preserve history in books. Others preserve it in ruins. But Gotland preserves its memory in stone. As the evening sun sinks into the Baltic Sea, Visby feels almost timeless. Medieval walls, narrow streets, churches that have watched centuries past. Yet, remarkable as they are not the oldest stories this island has to tell. Long before these walls were built, long before Sweden existed as a kingdom, Gotland stood at the crossroads of the Baltic. Merchants came here, sailors came here, warriors came here, and they left behind something unlike anything else in Northern Europe. Today we are stepping inside the Gotland Museum, the Fornsalen to be specific. Not simply to look at artifacts, but to glimpse a worldview, one carved into stone more than 1500 years ago. If there's one thing that makes Gotland truly unique, it's these picture stones. Their story begins during the migration period, around the 5th century AD. Over the following 6 centuries, they continued to evolve through the Vandal period and deep into the Viking Age, finally disappearing around the 11th century as Christianity transformed Scandinavia. Think about that for a moment. Nearly 600 years, or 20 generations. Entire kingdoms rose and disappeared while people on this island continued carving stones into limestone. More than 500 picture stones and fragments has been discovered on Gotland. Nothing comparable exists anywhere else in Northern Europe. Yes, similar monuments appear elsewhere, but nowhere did the tradition flourish with the same richness, artistic sophistication and continuity. These stones are, in many ways, uniquely Gotlandic. What strikes me the most is that they don't feel like decoration. Every image appears carefully chosen. Ships, riders, serpents, eagles, wolves, spirals, horns, banquets, processions, creatures we still struggle to identify. They almost like pages torn from a forgotten book. But unlike a book, there are no captions, no surviving author, no explanation. We recognize many of the symbols, yet we no longer speak the symbolic language in which they were created. Archaeologists have spent generations studying them. Historians compare them with later Norse literature, yet many scenes remains open to interpretation. If you ask me, there's something very intrinsic in this art form that you can recognize on a human level. For example, we have this very known picture stone depicting warriors wearing swords and seemingly very pointy heads that indicates helmets, and of course the longships depicted, and the Jormungandr, the world serpent, outlining the stone. And for any of the doubters out there, Even the beards were carefully depicted here, and these were proper beards. Far from all picture stones are grandiose and big. Many of them are actually quite small, like these ones, and they are typically being found in the fundaments of nowadays churches all around Gotland. So in a way, they carry memory even after the time period. And now, one of my personal favorites. There's one motif that appears again and again on Gotland's picture stones. A great swirling wheel, sometimes called the Hannus Knot. We don't actually know what it meant to people who carved it. Was it the sun, the turning of the seasons, the cycle of life and death? Or maybe motion itself? Or something that we have completely forgotten? The honest answer is, we simply don't know. What intrigues me extra with the Hannus Knot is that it's reoccurring in Finnish paganism as well, maybe indicating a Baltic connection. And of course we have to talk about these swirling wheels. These wheels has been debated for a long time ago, and there's no real consensus what they mean. But the animist in me suggests that these are sun wheels, symbolizing the cycle of life, rebirth, death, and resurrection. And you can find these symbols on many of the picture stones, for example here in different variations as well. This particular stone also has something that I interpret as Yggdrasil, accompanied with a longship, of course, with people who are rowing. Very interesting stone. And now what I deem as the crown jewel of the exhibition. Just look at this stone. The story it tells and the details. An amazing artwork. Here we can see shards from a picture stone. What seems to be a man riding a wolf. Maybe it connects to Tyr somehow. And the exhibition of course had some weaponry as well. More of that later. There are weapons here that you can see that are seemingly bent or destroyed. This is a very common practice when it comes to offering weapons to the afterlife. The weapons were probably destroyed because, just like a human being that passed, you had to make sure the weapon as well passed. So it's an quite animistic practice. Speaking of animism, here you can see what is referred to as resurrection eggs. Pretty cool. We tend to romanticize the Viking Age, but it was a really brutal time period. And I think these skulls need no further explanation. But these are very traumatic injuries. Everything from skull fractures to severed femurs. And yeah, it gets worse, as you can see. Not a good day at work. The famous Spillings Hoard, discovered here on Gotland, weighs more than 67 kilograms of silver. It remains the largest Viking Age silver hoard ever found anywhere in the world. But perhaps even more remarkable is where that silver came from. Arabic dirhams, Byzantium, Western Europe, the Baltic, Scandinavia. Looking at these treasures, one thing becomes impossible to deny. Gotland wasn't isolated. It stood at the center of an enormous trading network stretching across continents. We often imagine Vikings as raiders, and yes, some certainly were. But there were also merchants, craftsmen, sailors, diplomats, explorers, and nowhere illustrates that better than Gotland. Eventually, you step back outside. The streets of Visby are alive. People laugh. The cafes are full. The Baltic rolls quietly against the shore, just as it has for thousands of years. And it's easy to forget what lies beneath under your feet. But sometimes spending time with these stones, these weapons, these treasures, I don't see Gotland as just another beautiful island anymore. I see crossroads, a place where worlds meet, where ideas traveled, where stories were carved into stone long before they were ever written down. We may never fully understand every symbol these people left behind, but perhaps that isn't the point. Sometimes history doesn't ask us to solve every mystery. Sometimes it simply asks us to remember. And as long as these stones stand, a part of that ancient world remains with us. Thank you for joining me, and until next time, Tyrdom out.